Alright, let's dive into one of the most game-changing and honestly most misunderstood events in history, the First Crusade. This isn't just a simple story of knights and battles. It's a tangled web of collapsing empires, clashing faiths, and a ton of personal ambition that literally redrew the map of the world.
So here's the central question, right? It all kicks off when a Byzantine emperor basically puts out a help-wanted ad for a few hundred mercenary knights. He needs some backup to fight off invaders. But what shows up on his doorstep is something else entirely, a massive holy war that sweeps across continents. So how on earth did that happen?
Well, the short answer is, it's complicated. There's no single reason. The First Crusade was the direct result of a perfect storm, a whole bunch of different factors that have been building for years across Europe and the Middle East. You got politics, religion, economics, and just sheer desperation all colliding at the exact same moment. So let's break down what that storm actually looked like.
To really get a handle on this, we need to look at the two major players who are on a collision course at the end of the 11th century. You have the Eastern Roman Empire, which we call Byzantium, and the rising chaotic powers of Western Europe.
And what's fascinating here is the contrast. In one corner, you have the Byzantine Empire. I mean, it was once this incredible superpower, but after a century of corruption and bad leadership that drained its treasury, it was a mess, politically unstable and losing huge chunks of territory. Then, in the other corner, you have Western Europe, which is just bursting at the seams with a population boom. This creates a huge class of knights, younger sons of nobles with no land, no inheritance, just a whole lot of military training and a serious itch for a fight, for money, and for some kind of purpose.
And this timeline just lays out the crisis perfectly. 1071, boom, the Battle of Manzikert. The Byzantine army gets totally crushed by the Seljuk Turks. They lose almost all of Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey. It's a catastrophe. A decade later, a guy named Alexios Komnenos takes the throne, but the empire he inherits is broke and on the verge of collapse. So, totally desperate, he sends that plea west. And it's really specific. He's asking for professional soldiers. But that plea lands right in the lap of Pope Urban II, who sees a very different kind of opportunity.
And right here, this is the core of it all. This might be one of the biggest lost in translation moments in all of history. Alexios is thinking small, tactically. Hire some tough Western knights to help me get my land back. Simple. But Pope Urban? Oh, he's thinking big. He's thinking strategically. He sees a chance to unite a fractured Europe, to cement his own power as Pope, and crucially, to point all that violent energy from Europe's knights away from home and towards a common enemy.
This quote from Urban's big speech is so revealing. He wasn't just recruiting an army. He was rebranding an entire class of people. He looked at all these violent, landless knights who were basically just causing trouble, fighting each other for scraps, and he gave them a divine new job description. He was saying, hey, all that fighting you're so good at, stop doing it here. Go do it for God. So what's the sales pitch? It was genius, really. First, you've got the noble cause. Go help your Christian brothers. Can't argue with that. Second, a huge, legendary goal. Take back Jerusalem. Third, a very practical solution to Europe's own problems. But the real masterstroke, the absolute game changer, was the reward. A full pass, get out of jail, free card for all your sins. For the medieval mind, which was deeply religious but also incredibly violent, this was an offer you just couldn't refuse.
But here's the thing. Before the great lords and princes of Europe could even get their armor polished and their armies organized, the Pope's message was basically hijacked. It sparked a total wildfire of religious mania among the common people, which led to a completely unexpected and totally chaotic first wave.
And the guy at the center of this firestorm was a preacher known as Peter the Hermit. You have to imagine this guy as incredibly charismatic, traveling all over France and Germany, whipping crowds into a frenzy with stories of Christian suffering in the Holy Land. While the Pope's message was carefully targeted at the nobility, Peter's message hit home with everyone else. Peasants, the poor, the desperate.
And the response was just staggering. Peter the Hermit gathers a following of around 40,000 people. This isn't an army, it's a massive, disorganized mob of men, women, and children who set off for Jerusalem with a whole lot more faith than they had food, supplies, or military training.
And this People's Crusade, as it became known, went off the rails almost immediately.
They had no discipline, no supply lines, so they just pillaged their way across Europe. And tragically, their religious fervor curdled into something monstrous. Some of the leaders decided they should deal with the enemies of Christ at home before going anywhere else, which led to these absolutely horrific massacres of Jewish communities in Germany's Rhineland. It was a truly dark stain on the whole affair.
So you can imagine, when this giant, unruly mob finally stumbles its way to Constantinople, Emperor Alexios is horrified. This is not the elite fighting force he asked for. He basically wants them out of his capital as fast as possible, so he ferries them across the Bosphorus Strait into Anatolia. This turned out to be a fatal mistake. They were walking straight into the lion's den.
And almost right away, they were led into a trap by the Turks. The result wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. Of the tens of thousands who set out with Peter the Hermit, fewer than 3,000 made it back alive. The People's Crusade was completely annihilated.
So with that disastrous opening act over, the stage was finally set for the main event. This was the crusade the Pope had actually wanted from the beginning. An army led not by preachers and peasants, but by Europe's most powerful, ambitious, and battle-hardened nobles.
And this was a whole different beast. This force was led by the A-listers of the time. Guys like Godfrey of Bouillon, a deeply respected duke, Bohemond of Taranto, a cunning and absolutely ruthless Norman warrior, the incredibly rich Raymond of Toulouse, and Robert, the Duke of Normandy. These weren't just soldiers, these were powerful rulers, each with their own armies, their own ambitions, and their own agendas.
And this table does a great job of showing you that these guys were not all on the same page. You had genuine religious belief, like with Godfrey, who really seems to have been in it for the holy mission. But then you had pure, uncut ambition. Bohemond, for instance, had been cut out of his inheritance, so for him, the crusade was a golden opportunity to go conquer a kingdom of his very own. For these men, God, gold, and glory were all wrapped up together.
So back in Constantinople, when these massive armies led by these powerful men start showing up at his gates, Emperor Alexios gets very, very nervous. Remember, he asked for hired guns who would work for him. What he got was a collection of powerful princes who were his equals, and in some cases, his old enemies. He realized pretty quickly he wasn't hiring an army. He was trying to manage a coalition of extremely dangerous rivals. But Alexios was a master diplomat. He knew he couldn't control them with force, so he used his wits. He met with each leader one-on-one, giving them lavish gifts, but also demanding they swear a very important oath. The deal was simple. Any land you reconquer that used to belong to my empire, you have to give it back to me. It was a tense negotiation, but in the end, in exchange for food, supplies, and guides, most of them reluctantly agreed. Okay, so the oaths are sworn and the combined Crusader armies finally cross over into Asia. Their very first objective is a huge test, the city of Nicaea. And this isn't just some random town. It was the capital of the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum, a heavily fortified symbol of Turkish power in the region. The siege was brutal, lasting for more than a month. The Crusaders fought off a Turkish relief army. Their engineers managed to collapse one of the main defensive towers. The city was on the absolute brink of falling. The Crusader lords could already taste victory and were probably arguing over who would get the best loot.
And then comes the twist. The Crusaders wake up one morning, ready for the final, bloody assault. They look up at the city walls, and they see the Emperor's flags flying from the battlements. Not their banners, his. The city had surrendered overnight, but not to them.
So what happened? Well, while the Crusaders were busy planning their attack, Emperor Alexios' agents were secretly negotiating with the city's defenders. He offered them generous terms if they surrendered directly to him. The city's garrison, absolutely terrified of being sacked by the Crusaders, jumped at the deal. Alexios completely outplayed his new allies, taking the city without a fight and sending a very clear message about who was really running the show. And this is just so critical. The first great victory of the First Crusade wasn't won by Crusader swords, but by the Emperor's secret diplomacy. This immediately sowed seeds of deep mistrust and resentment between the Western knights and their supposed Byzantine allies. And it raises the huge question that's going to hang over the rest of the campaign. How in the world could this fragile, suspicious alliance possibly hold together on the long, brutal road that still lay ahead to Jerusalem?